And there's no sense in indicting my father anymore for the rated R movies that he let me watch when mom wasn't home.
That's a dad's job every once in a while to be like, hey, don't tell your mom, but we're going to watch this.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Zach Selwyn, lead singer of Zachariah and the Lobos Riders and Country Linen. You are listening and watching the All Over the Place podcast where the fun sanity never ends. You know what it is, y'all.
Hello and welcome back to All Over the Place. I am your host, Eric Porvoznik. Thanks again, everybody, for liking, sharing, subscribing. I'm going to bring Jim in for some big news. There you are, Jim Culver, my friend and co-host. How are you doing tonight?
I'm great. How are you?
Well, I don't want to get into too many of the details right now, but suffice to say, we are on a major upswing the last few days here on All Over the Place. More people liking, sharing, subscribing. We're getting more comments over at Facebook and on YouTube. And had some very, very encouraging conversations today with a couple of businesses here in the Valley of the Sun here in the Phoenix area. And awesome. As the details come to light in the next few days, definitely going to be sending out some major thanks. And pendulum continues to swing, folks, because of you. And we cannot thank you enough for supporting us and helping us grow here as we continue to thrive and monetize in 25. Great times, and it's because of you. Thank you so much.
Yep, indeed.
And tonight, unfortunately, Marty and Kathy not going to be joining us tonight. They'll be back in here soon enough. They're here in spirit. And right now, I'm going to be bringing in a local fixture here for the last few years in the Phoenix horror and beyond. And I got to know this guy when I was hosting movie parties. Actually, I saw him hosting movie parties, and it was one of the things that got me interested and excited in wanting to host movie parties, getting on that team when it was the Alamo Draft House and then the Majestic Cinemas. And now he's branched out and he's taking his brand of movie parties and horror, experiencing it like you've never done with the Cinesylum series. And I want to welcome to the show, Aaron Hudson. Welcome to All Over the Place. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, both of you, Eric and Jim. Good to be here.
Absolute pleasure having you here. And folks, I just want to hand it over to you, Aaron, because Cinesylum, you guys, multiple screens throughout the month, horror movies, and take it away. Tell us about Cinesylum and how it came to be.
Well, it came to be me and my co-host, my wonderful co-host, Danny and Sam had built this brand in this series, starting with Alamo and with Majestic that went under a different title, and we did that for many years, over hundreds of screenings, and really helped build a community of fans that would come out every week and multiple times a month. You would come out to a lot of the shows we would do in Gilbert, and some of the others, but I remember specifically seeing you at some of those Gilbert shows. And so when that kind of came to an unfortunate end, we made the decision to just kind of become free agents and basically take what we had done and continue doing it elsewhere. And so we are at the Roadhouse Scottsdale, which is a wonderful dine-in theater. They have 3 locations, another in Tucson, and I believe the third one's in Colorado.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly. And then we're also down at a little community theater in Phoenix called the Academy Theater. They're a local nonprofit, a small little place that does wonderful events and plays and stand-up comedy and all sorts of stuff throughout the year. The thing that we've kind of focused on is their nonprofit youth program, which is really a leadership program in all the ways, because it's not just allowing kids a chance to be in plays and be theatrical and be on stage. It's teaching them also the behind the scenes stuff. They have folks that are learning how to do lighting, stage craft and props, running a show. And so our shows there specifically just raise money for that theater to keep it alive, because it's a nonprofit and it can be a hard thing to keep those things alive. And we're able to do some really unique things there. And then the Roadhouse shows are just, those are just good old fashioned, good time to come out, have a bunch of people out, like-minded individuals. Horror is one of those genres that the more mainstream, I call them cinemaphils, can kind of snub their nose at sometimes. It's just horror, which I think this year in particular we've had in the last year or so, with movies like The Substance and Sinners and Weapons, we're seeing more people come around to the fact that horror can be actually really true cinema, as people say. But going to watch a silly schlock movie or a slasher or a monster movie, whatever it is, with a bunch of folks that get that kind of vibe and laugh when you laugh and all that, it's just, there's nothing quite like it to have, 100 or whatever other people there with you, just enjoying it, together.
Love it. And of course, you see in the background there behind Aaron a lot of awesome movie props. And I'm just in watching you through the years and just getting into movie parties, folks. What happens is the hosts we get dressed up as characters. We kind of get into that character and throw quotes out there for people, quiz them at the beginning, do giveaway stuff like that. Aaron was always getting into. I remember specifically Jaws when you were Robert Shaw's character. That was a great 35 millimeter, folks. The best way to see any kind of movie, but they had that, and that was always fun to watch you up there hosting the things. And so, what got you into movies, and then specifically, what branched you into horror specifically?
I mean, I always loved movies from before I even have a memory of it. I grew up with them. My dad had a very large VHS collection, and so that certainly benefited me. I really look back to the year 1990 as kind of a watershed year for young little Aaron. That's when Dick Tracy came out, which you can see some Dick Tracy stuff back there, and that's when Dances with Wolves came out. And those two movies kind of changed my. I was only 4, so I mean, it is what it is. But it was formative for young Aaron to see what a movie could be. And really just, my first making of movie books were, I had one on Dick Tracy, I had one on the 1989 Batman, and one on the Back to the Future trilogy. And those kind of became my Bibles as far as learning that somebody makes these things, somebody makes these movies. And so I've always had kind of an inquisitive mind as far as not just seeing the movie wasn't enough. I had to see where it came from and who made it. And maybe it's based on another property. And then you watch an old version of it, it was adapted before or whatever it was. And so that's the long and short of just kind of falling in love with movies and filmmaking as a whole. As far as horror goes, it's such a wide-ranging genre. I know you're at some point going to have a question about a particular movie, if I consider it horror or not. Horror is a wide-ranging genre. I do see a lot of people get kind of weird about it, like, well, that's not a horror movie, Aaron, because it's, once again, if you put that horror stamp on it, suddenly you can't take it as seriously with some folks, which is just
we'll blow people's minds then later with the question I'm going to ask you. It might
Okay.
change a whole bunch of things.
So that cinemaphile thinking, I think, is wrong, because I think one of the the things about horror that just makes it such a wonderful genre is how much stuff falls in that branch. There's comedic horror, there's the creature horror, there's slasher horror, there's political horror, there's, body horror. There's so many things, and you can do so many things with it. And that's why I was able to do a weekly and sometimes more than once a week series for years and not have it lose any steam, because horror is such a wide-ranging genre and the fans are wide-ranging with it.
And I saw you were on a panel one of the conventions here in the Phoenix area, and the topic was horror movies that really should be taken seriously for Best Picture consideration.
Yes,
and, just a microcosm of that. What are a few that you think should merit? I mean, you brought up Sinners from this year. I could definitely see that being considered for a Best Picture. But what are some through the years that struck you as particularly worthy?
We talked about one name I brought up, and not just because I'm attracted to her and her talent, but Mia Goth, was in Pearl and X and Infinity Pool, all within the span of like 18 months. And it was just, yes, they're all 3 horror movies, but they're all 3 so different. Even X and Pearl, which are in the same, universe, and her performances are amazing in all of them, and they're different. And she gives a monologue near the end of Pearl. It's all in one take, and she's just kind of losing her mind a little bit, talking to this other person, but she's really just kind of spewing out all this stuff. And it's just one of the most amazing performances I feel in the last several years. And, nobody outside of the horror community really cared. And it's like you couldn't take it seriously because it's in a horror movie. Even though Pearl, have you both seen Pearl? I don't know if you've.
Yeah,
I've seen Pearl and X.
Yeah,
I haven't seen the third one.
Pearl has this, it's a love letter to the 50s Technicolor dramas, but also it's a love letter in this kind of twisted way to the Wizard of Oz. There's a correlation to every character in the Wizard of Oz in Pearl. And it's a really great little movie that I feel like didn't get its due because of that fact. And so that was one I brought up. In recent years. Another one is The Substance, because The Substance actually got some nominations. And, Demi Moore got a lot of hype on her performance. She won some awards at some other things, and then, didn't win the Oscar. And a lot of people joked, that the Oscars were the plot of The Substance, because this younger woman, wins the award for Nora, where the older woman who's playing this role about ageism in Hollywood, especially towards females, and how sexist it can be, and how hard it can be for a woman to grow old gracefully. It's almost like they're not allowed to. And it's just such a great performance. And I think of like that scene when she's preparing for her date, and she keeps looking outside at that billboard, and it's the billboard of Margaret Qualley, who's like this perfect engineered perfection, and she keeps saying things that are wrong with her through that billboard. And I just thought it was just one of the most honest depictions I've ever seen. I think men have felt that too, whether we admit it or not, but females especially, they're always feeling like they're up against these things that we see on TV and scrolling our phones or whatever. And I just feel like, once again, it's horror. We don't take it as seriously as we should. I don't know how you guys felt about that movie. Maybe you hated it. Maybe you liked it. But
I haven't seen it, and I got to be honest. I'm going to turn a lot of the show over to Jim today. You mentioned the different subgenres of it. Through the years, by and large, horror had never really grabbed me. There have been some that have, but I like a lot of comedy with my horror, like Fright Night. Love that one. I may go back to my 80s when I was a teen. I was just the perfect person for it. But
Sure.
that and Lost Boys. Then later on, Shaun of the Dead. I like being able to laugh while there's
so once
these
again,
horrific
in
things
this
going on.
wide-ranging genre, the comedy struck you.
But The Howling, I love werewolf movies, werewolf and vampire movies. And so I mean the creature things, I like those. But and late I've been getting into Jordan Peele, but Jim is our resident horror and our cinephile as well. So Jim, I'm gonna let you field that question and turn it over to you for a little bit here.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, Substance was an excellent movie. I don't know if I'd go as far as to call it Oscar worthy, but I think it was very well made. My own pick probably for a horror movie that deserves some Oscar consideration, I'd probably pick Hereditary. Specifically, Toni Collette's performance was amazing in that.
That's one we brought up. That one, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, definitely. I would say a contender for Best Picture. That was a fantastic movie and so well made.
It was. Yeah.
Going back a little further, I'd say probably Shyamalan's Sixth Sense and even Signs. I think were both probably Best Picture material. I thought they were both extraordinarily well made films. And I think, I think some of the acting in those movies, it just deals with some really thorny family issues, some issues of, faith and belief in things, and these tortured lead performances from these actors. And I think I think it's up there with some of the best dramas out there. I really do. I think the talent involved and the writing involved in some of those films are extraordinary. So yeah, I would definitely put those up for Oscar consideration. I'm trying to think going back further than that. Horror is, as you said before, horror is really having a moment right now. The last year or two, there's been a lot of great horror movies that have come out. Sinners and Nosferatu and a lot of other great ones. I think a lot of them kind of lend themselves more to the technical side of things as far as awards go, but they are very, very well made. And I think they are kind of crossing over into some more mainstream acceptance. A movie like Sinners made a ton of money. I mean, and of course the latest Conjuring movie just made something like $86 million over the last weekend. So it's definitely not just a niche thing anymore. There's a lot of mainstream a lot of mainstream audiences being won over by horror movies these days, and I don't know where that's going to lead in the future, but I think there probably will come a day when the Academy can look at a horror movie like any other genre and consider it worthy of an award, and I think it's probably well past time.
Yeah, because I mean, when you think of it this way, we're nearing 100 years of the Oscars. In a couple of years, we have our 100th anniversary.
Yep.
And in that nearly 100 years, we've had 7 horror movies that have been nominated for Best Picture. 7. And, you talk about things that have been like missed. Like Psycho was not nominated for Best Picture. It got a Best Director nod, didn't get Best Picture. It wasn't until The Exorcist that a horror movie got a nomination.
Right.
And I think it's something like 37 total wins for a horror movie in that 100 years. And obviously, what, like you said, mostly in categories like makeup or that sort of thing.
Right.
I mean, we basically have the makeup award because American Werewolf in London. It was such a talking point that there wasn't an award for that when that came out, that the next year they had one.
I don't know if Rick Baker has an honorary Oscar, but he should have one by now.
Oh,
that man is a genius.
He's won some Oscars, thankfully.
Yeah, he's got some actual Oscars.
Yeah. But it's like you said, it's been a genre that's mostly been when they have gotten that little bit of praise, it's been on the technical side more. Right. And it's a shame because you mentioned Jordan Peele. He won the screenwriting Oscar that year for Get Out, and it deserves it because it was a very smartly written movie. And it had something to say for a lot of people. And specifically, much like Sinners, it's an undervalued demographic that those movies really, really key into. And thankfully, when those movies make money, it shows these lawyers that pretend to be studio executives that we should make good movies for these people because they want to come out and give their hard-earned money to these filmmakers like Ryan Coogler and Jordan Peele and actors like Michael B. Jordan that speak to them,
Yeah. And this is a really interesting time for horror, I think, because, I feel like almost every other genre, Hollywood's kind of playing it safe. They're just giving us cookie cutter corporate stuff, sequels and the like. But, almost every horror movie that comes out, there's a lot of originality. There's a lot of creativity. There's a lot of original vision. The other day I got around to watching The Monkey, which is just completely off the wall, psycho comedic horror, but it just such a unique vision. So it's like nothing else that I've seen in a long time. And so just as a horror aficionado, why do you think that horror is continuing to being pumped out and not only be successful, but be creatively well made while all the other genres are, playing it safe?
One, it's cheaper to make most of the time. The average horror movie isn't going to cost you what a Capes movie costs, So I think that's always been in its benefit. Obviously, there's movies that cost more and whatnot, but just in general, horror's kind of been considered the cheap genre, kind of like comedies a lot of times. And horror people that are true horror people, they're usually folks that at some point felt outcast. And people who failed to connect with the world at large find safe haven in the arts. And that could be in music, it could be in painting. But a lot of those folks find themselves, on a Friday night with that one or two friends that they have renting a horror movie. Back in the day, now we stream them, Right. But horror is interesting because horror and exploitation, if we're talking like genre film, is always kind of ahead of the game. Hollywood as a whole kind of likes to pat itself on the back for being progressive and evolving and showing humanity getting better. But a lot of the times they're like 20 years behind what Hollywood and exploitation films are doing. It's like, when, and it's a great movie, but like when Mississippi Burning came out in the 80s and it was like, look, we're really telling a good story here. And it's like, are you doing anything that blaxploitation wasn't doing 15 years earlier? Not really. No, you just happen to finally get a great actor like Gene Hackman to, showcase that. And it's the same thing with like a few years ago, Paul Verhoeven, who's a favorite filmmaker of mine. He did this kind of, weirdo, a little bit movie called Benedetta, which was like a nunsploitation, basically, just on a bigger budget and, with a great filmmaker behind it. And it had something to say about faith and it had something to say about religious trauma and all that. But once again, those crazy Italians were doing it back in the 70s with movies like Killer Nun. So, right. It's just an interesting thing that horror, I feel, is always ahead of the curve. You mentioned those early Shyamalan movies, movies like Signs. Signs came out just, a year and a half or so after 9/11. And you can feel that in just not only the way the alien invasion is handled and that fear, but even like Shyamalan's little cameo as this character who is obviously not a white American, And he's kind of an outcast because of this thing he's done. He fell asleep and killed a woman behind, he was behind the wheel of a car. And, you can feel these topical social commentary things happening on a very real level. It's not just about the scares and the levity that humor adds. There is something about what these movies are saying. And I feel like as a genre as a whole, horror people are usually big-hearted folks who feel. And so it's not just about finding what we're fearful of. It's finding, because you can have monsters, you can have creatures, you can have aliens and all these things. But the scariest thing in the world is just being human sometimes and dealing with other people. And horror people, I feel, who grew up with this genre, feel that.
I'm glad you brought that up because, and obviously, like Jim's saying, like you guys are talking about, just a thinking man's horror movie. And Jordan Peele, I think it does such a great job. And Get Out is one of my favorite movies, horror, whatever, of the last few years. And I'm glad that he's, decided to enter this genre. But on the flip side of that, I want to get your guys' take on torture porn, because I think that's, as someone who's the casual horror viewer, and the best I could do tonight, folks, is breaking out my Highway to Hell shirt with AC/DC. But that to me is such a turn. But again, there's something for everybody. And what's your guys' take on torture porn as its popularity has increased in the horror genre in recent years?
Go ahead, Jim.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think that term gets thrown around far too loosely. I think there's a lot of movies that get labeled with that really aren't. Really don't fit that qualification. For example, the Hostel movies, those were kind of the big forebears of the mainstream movies that were first labeled torture porn. That's the first time I ever saw that term applied to a mainstream movie. But I really didn't feel like those were torture porn. I felt like those were about torture, but that was certainly depicted on screen. But there were a lot of themes going on in that movie about characters and how they treat the surroundings, tourists, and how they treat the places they visit, how they treat the people that they're visiting and the cultures they're visiting, things like exploitation, and then kind of their a hyper violent way of having that done back to them. I think that's, I think that Eli Roth was actually exploring some kind of interesting themes there. And as far as the actual violence, it was pretty tame compared to a lot of other horror movies I've seen. So I don't think that one specifically, for example, deserves that label. And I think a lot of other movies that have been labeled that way don't deserve it. I think some other Eli Roth movies and some other films I've seen probably do deserve that. That are more just kind of more grindhouse, more more down and dirty. That mostly just exist to see characters go through certain things, but don't really have a point beyond that. I don't think that makes the movie valueless necessarily, but I think it just comes down to kind of being honest about what your movie's about. I think it's a term that some kind of highfalutin critics throw out way too easily about movies that don't really deserve it in a lot of cases.
No movies for everyone. And like I said, horror has this widespread, shotgun of genres and micro genres that it encompasses. And yeah, the first time I heard torture porn was thrown out was like the first couple Saw movies, Hostel. And I feel like those movies kind of got unfairly called that. I get that it was some of the violence on screen was more extreme than a lot of folks were used to in more of a mainstream movie. But I still feel like they were, they had something there for a certain people. I know more recently, the Terrifier movies are a little bit controversial because there's a lot of really grisly violence in those. But I also know when I've done those movies as screenings, people are just kind of, they're practical effects fans, and they're seeing practical effects taken to kind of as far as they can go in this kind of visceral violence and such. And they're there to see what's the most creative way can we see this clown kill someone. with practical effects. And, it's kind of like, almost like going on a roller coaster. You're actually safe, but how extreme can we, how big can we make this drop? And so I know a lot of people that love those movies, and also, Terrifier 2 and 3 in particular have a very strong female kind of hero in them who fights back against the evil and all that. And so, like any movie, you kind of get what you put into it. If you go into a movie and you think this is not going to be for me, it's torture porn, or it's super violent, or it's just about the kills, you're probably not going to have a good time. But if you go in thinking like, this is going to be ridiculous, I'm going to watch some really crazy over the top kills, some guy with putty and glue and fake blood and all these things made this happen, that's kind of cool. You might enjoy yourself, but I'm not I would never outright publicly trash a genre or a movie for that matter, just because I believe all movies deserve respect, even the bad ones, because no one sets out to make a bad movie. Someone's out there working really hard trying to make something of it. And so torture porn, it might not be my personal genre, but for some people it gives them catharsis in some weird way.
And like I said, there's something for everybody. And I think back to you talk about your dad's big VHS collection. I remember video stores and back in the 80s, Faces of Death, parts
Faces
1
of
through God knows how many volumes we had of that one. So yeah, like there's something for everybody. Absolutely.
There's people that like that stuff. There's people that love that stuff, and I would never disparage anybody to, on one hand, it's totally cool if it's not for you. That's the thing. It's like, it's okay to just say that's not for me, and I'm not going to continue with it, or that genre or that subgenre or that film series or whatever. It's totally cool. Like, it's okay for something not to be for you, and never also feel guilty if it is for you. Because, just because somebody tells you that you're stupid or whatever, that's their problem, that they don't see what you see in something. That's how I feel.
And that's been brought up on the show, and I'll bring it up again. I don't believe in saying and defining something as a guilty pleasure. I like it because I like it, and I'm not going to make an apology for it.
I feel no guilt in any of my pleasures. That's how I feel. Yeah.
And I'm a Catholic. You'd think I would feel guilty about certain things, but no, not with movies or music. Nope. And folks, I once again want to thank Aaron, Cinesylum Aaron Hudson, for joining us here on All Over the Place. We are, of course, I want to throw some love out to our friends, Danny Zalesko over Danny Zalesko Presents. Make sure you check him out, and all concerts going on, not only here in Phoenix, but across the Southwest and across the country over at DZP, Danny Zalesko, dzpresents.com/events. And also want to send some love out to our good friends over at Vinyl Record Dude, new location there in Scottsdale at the corner of Scottsdale and Shea. Make sure you get in there. We are fast approaching their very big grand opening. I was talking with Nick today. Big things are afoot over there in Scottsdale coming up in November. And with us, of course, I said Aaron, Cinesylum Aaron. And, also fast approaching is the witching season. And for you, it seems like every day is Halloween, as the guys in ministry once sang. And, but with Halloween getting closer, what special events are on the horizon for Cinesylum?
Well, in about, let's see, what today's Tuesday. So in about a week, next Wednesday, we're showing the original 1922 Nosferatu, and we have the band The Invincible Czars.
Oh, they're coming out and doing that again. That's awesome.
They are coming out, and they're going to perform a live score, an original score that they wrote for Nosferatu. It was amazing when I had them out, I think 3 years ago. And so I'm really excited to have them out again to do another show.
Now, is that going to be a Roadhouse, or is that going to be at the Academy?
Yeah, it's at Roadhouse. Tickets are on sale. If you go on our Instagram, you can find the link, or if you go on the Roadhouse website, you can find it. And so I'm excited for that. I'm always excited for special guests. We just had, we did a premiere night for the new incarnation of Witchboard, and we had Chuck Russell there. And that was a big deal for me because I grew up with, The Mask and Eraser and The Blob and, Nightmare 3, all these movies that he directed. And so it was really cool to have him there and have a premiere night with the director there. So that's always a blast. And so the band, same thing. It's really cool to have a band there to perform live to a movie that's over 100 years old. So we're excited about that. We're going to be showing John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness in October at Roadhouse. We're going to be showing William Friedkin's The Exorcist at the Academy on it's going to be from a 35 millimeter scan. So it's going to be like watching a print. So we're excited for those events, and more to come. So
movies for people who love movies. And I mentioned earlier, as movie hosts of these different events, we dress up and get into it. But what I love about these parties is it's very much like a Saturday midnight showing, and the fans get into it. And what have been some of your favorite costumes or different, just people who have gone really over the edge of things that impressed you?
I did a double feature of the Slumber Party Massacre movies once, and this guy Robert came out as the killer from Part 2. And I don't know if you've seen Slumber Party Massacre Part 2, but it's ridiculous. It's part musical, and the villain has this crazy guitar that also has a drill on the end of it, and this crazy costume. It's kind of very influenced by like the 50s and like early rock and roll. And he came out dressed like that. That was great. When I did Frankenhooker, one of the times I did Frankenhooker, this fellow Elijah came out dressed as Frankenhooker, which was hilarious because it's a ridiculous costume to begin with, and then to have a fella doing it was just a lot of fun. I think those are always fun. Texas movies, people always come dressed up for. I mean, people always, we always encourage that. If you want to come dressed up, if you don't want to come dressed up, who cares? It's fine. Come enjoy yourself. But it's always fun to have people come out dressed up.
Yeah, my favorite one was hosting a Lost Boys party, and this guy came out, and he had a Kiefer Sutherland from Lost Boys. It was a tattoo, huge across on his bicep. That was just badass.
I did speaking of panels, I did a panel on Showgirls, this last fan fusion for its 30th anniversary, and kind of reappraising it as maybe it's a minor masterpiece if you look at it under the right lens. And this woman came up afterwards, and she's like, "Thank you for this. You don't know what this movie meant to me as a 19-year-old when it came out." And then she showed me she had a tattoo of Elizabeth Berkley from Showgirls on her thigh. And I was like, well, that alone made this worth it to me, to do this.
Well, did you tag Elizabeth on social media? Maybe she caught wind of that?
I did tag her, I believe, but, who knows if they see it, or if they have handlers that ignore that stuff. But, every once in a while when we tag somebody, they'll respond or follow you back or whatever.
Well, I became, like I did mention, I became a fan of the movie party experience. And now that you've been doing Cinesylum over the last few months, what's been the general reaction? Have you gotten any recruits to come on board and maybe help you a little bit more backstage with things?
I mean, I have close friends that, are willing to help out. And the big thing is, we do raffle prizes for every movie, and we try to somewhat theme it to that movie or the filmmaker or an actor or the genre, or whatever it is, so something that kind of makes sense for that night. And that can get very expensive to keep up with. And so I want to shout out some people like Edgar, and there's someone named Cole, and there's someone named Laura, and I'm gonna forget others. Flynn, so many folks who have helped me out behind the scenes to make sure that we have prizes and I'm not going broke keeping these shows going, and because that's a big part of it. It's just that excitement of you just might win something, and there's people to this day who've been coming for years who are like, my God, it's the first time I won, and I feel good for them. That you feel good when you win.
My Blu-ray copy of Children of the Corn is around here somewhere. So
yeah, there you go. It feels good.
Just answer some trivia question, folks. Come out to these things, like Aaron said. You can win, and sometimes you walk away. Let's break it out again. You sometimes get some props.
I mentioned that Witchboard screening, and at Witchboard we had a popcorn bucket, a specific Witchboard popcorn bucket that everybody got. Everybody in the audience got one. And those who stuck around afterwards had Chuck sign it. He stuck around and hung out, which was very cool. Signed for free, took photos and everything. And so a lot of people got their popcorn buckets signed by him. And so, yeah, you never know. We did Urban Legend a couple weeks ago, and we gave everyone Pop Rocks. Because if you've seen Urban Legend, there's this scene where, Freddy Krueger himself, Robert Englund's this like professor, and he's doing this class on Urban Legends. And he's like, would you have Pop Rocks with a soda? And it's this whole scene. And so we had everyone, open their Pop Rocks and have them during that scene. So just, it's fun little things that are interactive. You remember that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, it's again movies for people who love movies, by people, hosted by people who love movies. Oh, I miss it. I do. It was a very fun experience. I'm glad
it was
I
a
got
special
to do it.
time, when we were doing that there, and I'm just trying to keep it alive in some small way,
I'm glad you're doing it. And I keep my eyes open because, again, there are those horror movies that I do dig. And another one I've loved in recent years, and there's, of course, the comedic element to it, but I'm a big Vince Vaughn fan, and I got to see a very cool side of him in Freaky. I love that movie.
Freaky's
it's a
great.
different twist.
I like that little, once again, that micro genre of taking these old tropes, like the Freaky Friday and Groundhog Day, and finding a horror twist on them. And Freaky was great. Vince Vaughn, he found the role for him as a teenage girl,
we did. I never thought I'd see it coming from him, and yeah, it was he was all grown up, and all grown up in a different way.
Yeah.
Well, if you've seen him in Brawl and Cell Block 99, you know that guy can do anything. I mean, once I saw him in that, I realized this guy has insane range.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And Dragged Across Concrete. I'm glad he and that director got involved more than once. That was, yeah, love Vince Vaughn.
Yeah, that director did a movie called Bone Tomahawk.
Bone Tomahawk, yes, exactly.
Rules. I did that as a screening several years ago now, and during that last act, I won't spoil it for anybody who's not seen it, but it gets,
that's gruesome.
It'll split an audience. And it was great for that, to kind of feel that,
so to speak,
with a live crowd, yeah, so to speak.
And it was hinted at earlier, folks, and I think now as we're talking about cross genres and things like that, this is going to help settle a bet between me and co-host Marty, because I brought it up and I was like, and he was a little taken aback that I said you could possibly consider Ghostbusters a horror movie.
I consider Ghostbusters absolutely gateway horror. That's the kind of movie that you watch when you're a little boy or a little girl, and you realize you kind of enjoy being spooked in a fun way. Like, it's kind of fun to get that little bit of just that right element, that atmospheric element of, there's something paranormal going on. There's something a little scary, but still fun going on. Gateway horror 101, in my opinion. And so I agree with you that I think
Jim,
that is,
I hear Jim kind of agreeing as well. Yes.
I'd say it's borderline, but yeah, I think so. I think there was only one part as a kid that really scared me, and that was the beginning with the library ghost. Mm-hmm. But I think once that scene starts that kicks it off, you realize this movie could be really scary. Like anything could happen in this, and it could be genuinely scary. It's not just going to play nice with the ghosts. So yeah, I think it qualifies.
It's a comedy, it's a fantasy, but I definitely consider Ghostbusters gateway horror for a lot of folks.
There you have it, Marty. You're outvoted 3-1. That just thank you, gentlemen, for settling a very silly bet. I appreciate that.
Well, let me ask you this: has there been any movies that you were considering showing but decided not to? You said, well, this is too intense, this is too controversial, it's too much, or just people won't like it. Like anything.
There's a director by the name of Victor Salva. And Victor Salva is a bit of a controversial name.
I know where this is going, but go ahead.
Google him if you want. And so I've considered showing Jeepers Creepers with the attachment of an art versus artist discussion with the crowd. And I've never done it. For reasons that you can Google. The movie that got him in trouble, I'll just say it's a movie called Clown House, and there's a lot of people that really like Clown House. It's also a horror movie, and so once again, there are movies that I just haven't touched for one reason or another, and that's just giving an example of one and a very clear, obvious reason as to why I have not touched it.
Yeah, no, I get that. That's definitely a case where you have it's a test of, can you separate the art from the artist? And
yeah.
I've seen some analysis of his movies that definitely hinted some things about him. And it's kind of, and once you see that, it's kind of hard to appreciate his movies because they're colored a certain way. I think the Jeepers Creepers is a classic. I think it stands on its own. I think that's definitely a film you can enjoy and separate the art from the artist. But I think that's something that everybody has to do on their own. Like I can appreciate the art that went into making Repulsion and some of Roman Polanski's other films, and still find him, a kind of a enlightened human being. Let's just say
these movies are made by hundreds of people. And sometimes as film fans, we get obsessed with the director, and it's like a lot of people made these movies, a lot of great artists.
That's true.
When I showed The Burning, which is a movie that was written by Harvey Weinstein before he became, a thing, we talked about this in the intro. I was like, there's a lot of people that worked on this movie in front of the camera and behind the camera that had nothing to do with the script.
Yep.
And I said, Harvey's rotting in prison. We're not. So I made everybody boo his name when he came up, and it's become a tradition when his credit pops up in a movie, everybody boos. And
Yep.
I told Rose McGowan this a few years ago. I was like, because we were talking about what I do and everything, and I told her, I said, whenever there's a movie that he's involved in, the entire crowd will boo his name, and it made her kind of feel good because it's like when I did Grindhouse. She doesn't want her work to be hidden away forever in that movie, or Robert Rodriguez's, or the other actors, or the other people that were involved in makeup effects and all that, Right. And so, we boo his name and cheer her all the extra loud. So made her happy, and that was a good answer for me. So
seems like a very mature way to deal with that.
Booing somebody loud is certainly one way to
boo people that need to be booed, but still enjoy the movie.
Yeah.
What it is.
It is a good cathartic thing to do, and I just the same as I'll cheer if I see a guy that I actually know up there on screen. So it's
Well, I mentioned Urban Legend, and as it's popping up all these names, people are cheering for them. When Jared Leto's name popped up, big chunk of folks booed him. So the crowd shows you where the zeitgeist is on these things.
Right.
And on that crowd note, there's something that we've bemoaned here on this show throughout our 3-4 years now is movies and especially ever since COVID still trying to find their footing, and you brought that up a little bit earlier, Aaron, but I think one of the great things, and it was certainly I was explaining to Marty, like whenever you did the old horror presentations at the old theater, it was a packed house all the time. And Kathy, co-host Kathy, has brought up that like going and seeing these revivals, whether it's the original Wizard of Oz or anything, and the theaters are packed for these classic movies, these tried and true movies. And do you compare that to as a gateway to getting people back into theaters? Like I just think back to the 80s, the 90s, and they were events.
Yeah.
And now we're turning to just one night event movies. Do you think we can get back to that? Using some of these nights, the Cinesylum nights, as a gateway to get people in?
Well, on our end, we do these screenings that are obviously the repertory classics, but we also do premiere nights, which is the Thursday leading into the opening weekend. We'll have a premiere night for certain titles, and we get a packed house for those too. And it's kind of fun because none of us typically have seen the movie. Occasionally, maybe I've seen a screener or something, or maybe somebody saw it at a festival earlier on, if it was a test screening, whatever it was. But 99% of the time, everyone's seeing it for the first time. But they still have those wonderful reactions, and it's just kind of been a way to celebrate new movies as well as old ones. And some of these horror movies that come out, are just truly great movies, and some of them it really helps because if you would have went by yourself and just kind of went with maybe one friend or a partner or by yourself, you wouldn't have enjoyed it as much as you would have in a packed house where everyone's laughing at the right time, cheering a really good kill if it's a that kind of movie. And so we're trying to balance that out of also being like, hey, new movies need some love too.
No argument for me as someone who loves movies, and it saddened me to see to just people not getting back to movies, especially once theaters opened back up again. It just took forever to get more than 4, 5, 6 people into those screenings.
Yeah, it was really hard coming out of COVID. That's one of the things that really helped us was the horror community, because when like me and Danny Sam started doing these screenings as you know, as COVID was you know, still, you know, going on but winding down. You know, we were getting way more people in our screenings than these other movies were, and it meant something that we were getting a little crowd, you know, a little community, and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, and people coming back to the movies. And we live in a weird time where movies that used to would have done okay business, you know, people have kind of been taught, like, well, just wait, it's a streaming title, you know, only go see the really big movies on the big screen. And
Right.
it's unfortunate because obviously I love to see the new Avatar on the biggest screen possible. It's a great time. It's immersive. It's meant for that experience in a lot of ways, but that doesn't mean these little, you know, smaller movies, you know, whether it's something like, you know, recently we've had some things like Honey Don't and whatnot. Just this smaller kind of movies that once upon a time would have, you know, hung around a little bit. And you know, I hate that studios kind of too quickly jumped on to like day and date, you know, where movies for a while were being, you know, streamed on the same day as they opened in theaters. And they changed it to where, you know, the theatrical window shortened quite a bit, you know. And I just feel that was myopic on their part, and we're feeling the effects still from that training to the public of just wait a bit, it'll be on streaming before you know it.
And having worked in a video store in the 80s, I still remember the 12-month window that studios, and then when it dropped to 9 months, and then 6 months, and then, you know, now it's day and date. So yeah, it's a different time. You roll with it, and hopefully you get enough people coming out and appreciating movies and being that communal experience on the big screen with each other. And I can't thank you enough for continuing to do this with horror movies and just getting out there.
I mean, so many people, I think the folks that come out, because it's really, it seems like it really does a lot for a lot of them. They'll come to me and tell me how much it means to them to have a place to come and hang out with other movie folks. Because, you know, we're adults. It's not, you know, what are you going to do? Ask the drive-through worker at McDonald's to have a sleepover, you know, or something? You know, it's hard to make friends. And I see people make friendships at these shows. I've seen people become lovers. I've seen people their families go on cruises together that met at these shows. And that really does mean something, that people are meeting other people and having a good time at these shows. Because it's like you said, it's that communal aspect of movies that is almost a lost art. And it's, you know, it's unfortunate. So I'm happy to see a wide range of ages, younger folks that are in that, you know, 18 to 22-year-old kind of age group, all the way to obviously much older, and just all in between. I love it. I love all of them coming out.
And on that familial note, I know you've got some little ones to tuck in, but I wanted to touch on them very quickly because I remember seeing them at some screenings. But what's it like? Tell us about, you know, the experience that your kids have. And is there anything that you consider too young for them?
You know, you mentioned Ghostbusters, and I'll never forget when my daughter asked me a few years ago. She found it. She knew the song, and she asked, "Can we watch Ghostbusters?" And I was like, "Well, let's see how this goes. This might be a real quick trip." And she loved it. You know, she loved the whole thing, and she, you know, has loved movie. You know, during COVID, when she was really young, she used to stay up late with me and watch Westerns every night. That became her thing. She'd say, "Daddy, neigh," because that's what her term for Westerns was, you know, and horses was neigh. And that was a special time for me to just watch old Westerns with her every night. And, you know, now she's at an age where there's still some stuff that I wouldn't show her. But for instance, she just watched The Lost Boys for the first time and loved it. She had seen the Twilight movies and really liked those. And Lost Boys kind of seemed like a natural progression of that. She went through all the old Universal monster movies with me years ago, which led to Monster Squad. And so she's definitely someone who has a wide range in movies she likes. I love sharing movies with her when it's time to show them. And she likes really, you know, stuff that's really meant for kids. And she likes some stuff that maybe other 7-year-olds probably wouldn't watch, and that's okay. But, you know, I'm very careful with it. And she's always been a big fan of watching behind the scenes stuff. And she's also seen Daddy editing videos. So she's seen how things are made and put together. And I always kind of understood that somebody is making these, somebody is doing makeup. It's all kind of, you know, if it's scary, it's kind of a fun scary because it's not real. And so there is, you know, she's told me, she's like, when I'm 12, I'll watch The Shining. And I'm like, we'll see. You know, you might be before then, might be after that. But she decided on that herself. She's like, when I'm 12, I'll watch The Shining. So she's even self-policing herself in a way of like stuff that, at least from the outside, might look a little too scary for her right now.
Well, Jim, you've got that teenager, so yeah, you understand that.
Yeah, that's definitely something. Conversations we're having in our house is kind of what movies he's ready for, because obviously he's 14, he wants to watch everything, but having those conversations about what's appropriate and what's not, and my parents raised me and we just watched everything, and it was which was a fun way to grow up, but I don't know if it's necessarily the best way to grow up. So we're putting some kind of different restrictions on things, but yeah, absolutely, it's an interesting time when your kid's about that age, and you can really kind of open up the world to them as far as culture goes, and how much of it should be your childhood and how much of it should be the new stuff is another issue also. So
yeah, and she, she'll like, it's kind of cool because like she just watched K-pop Demon Hunters, and it's a big thing, and she wants to show that to me, and I love that because obviously there's stuff that I'd love to show her, but like I see some folks who are like, oh, you're not gonna let her see the Star Wars prequels, are you? And I'm like, I'm not gonna gatekeep my kid because you think something shouldn't be seen. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of, and so like she gets a good mixture of new movies and really old things, and stuff that I grew up with, but just like a good balance. And I'm also like, I don't want to be that dad that shows them everything at some point. Like I feel like it's an important thing to have those movies that you might have snuck behind your parents' back to see at some point, even if they probably would have said yes at a certain, but I just feel like that was also part of growing up, is like, like I said, my dad's VHS collection. There might've been a time where I grabbed a certain movie too soon without letting anybody know, because I knew it was a little, it's just, it gives you that little thrill. And so, right. I'm sure at some point she'll do that, and I probably won't get that mad about it. So
I shouldn't have watched The Howling at Grandma's that summer. She had HBO. I shouldn't have watched it. That freaked me out for a while. No more than Salem's Lot freaked me out when my parents actually sat me down to watch it, because I was reading Stephen King at a younger age. So either way, it'll happen when it happens, and you work through it as you work through it. And there's no sense in indicting my father anymore for the rated R movies that he let me watch when mom wasn't home. So anyway.
Yeah. You brought up sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's a dad's job every once in a while to be like, hey, don't tell your mom, but we're going to watch this.
You brought up Salem's Lot, Eric. That actually leads me to a question I had was, some of my favorite horror movies are not really movies, but miniseries.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I think the original It was kind of my gateway drug into horror when I was like 10, because it just absolutely scared the shit out of me. And a movie had never terrified me that much, and I realized this is something that I was really interested in exploring. That somebody could get that strong of an emotional response out of me. And I think honestly, the best horror movie to come out in the last probably 10 years was Mike Flanagan's House on Haunted Hill. I think it's fantastic. So I don't know if this is like a copyright issue, but do you ever show any miniseries that you're in the festival, or is that not?
I mean, we could technically license them. You can. Certain stuff gets a little weird, but it would be more the screen space issue because they can get a little long.
Right.
But yeah, I think Stephen King even recently said that he was doing streaming before streaming was a thing, because now we're in this era where a lot of things are just miniseries or shorter episodes, and obviously so many of his adaptations in that kind of period that you mentioned there, specifically in the 90s. A lot of miniseries adapted from his works and everything. Those are great. Those are the original The Stand, and they redid The Shining in like 97 or so. They did that, and I love the original It as well. That from with Tim Curry as Pennywise and everything. That's really really enjoyable stuff. So I love miniseries, and you mentioned the Flanagan stuff. All that's really, really enjoyable. So I love a good miniseries, because I feel like what's also nice about those is there's an end point. I know I'm not going to be drug out for 10 years, and hopefully it won't get canceled or get really bad. It's
Right.
8 episodes or 4 episodes or whatever it is, and then you're done.
Well, Aaron, I cannot thank you enough. I'm glad we were able to reconnect. I'm going to be, like I said, keeping my eyes out for the horror movie that I can actually go to and enjoy, because I'm a little pickier with the genre. But maybe I should just step outside of my box, because I'll be with people who love the movie, and maybe that can make me love it a little bit more.
It's always good to go outside your box a little bit.
Exactly. It comes
unless
in handy.
It's the batter. The batter can't leave his box unless he lets you know. So
that's right. If I'm not looking, but definitely you want, for those who are watching on YouTube, you've been seeing the ticker across the bottom, ways to follow Aaron and the Cinesylum. But for those of you who are listening on the audio platforms, please be following at Cinesylum, and that is at CINESYLUM. And you want to go to at Cinesylum_PHX, or go to their Facebook page, facebook.com/Cinesylum. And finally, the Hudson Frohawk, would that be at YouTube, or
that's my Instagram.
Instagram? Okay, so just Hudson Frohawk. Love that name, by the way.
Great username. Yeah.
So Hudson, then FROHAWK. And also just go to the websites for Roadhouse Cinemas in Scottsdale and the Academy Theater in Phoenix. And not just the movies there, like Aaron was saying, that's more of the theater experience, theater with an RE as opposed, and in addition to an ER for movies, but just the great things there from a theatrical and acting standpoint. I'm definitely going to be digging into that. And just and thank you for having the Cinesylum series help augment that financially. That is so cool. So thank you for coming on all over the place with us and letting us know a little bit more about Cinesylum.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so glad that we ran into each other at
a baseball game of all places.
I'm filming, you're umping, and I just hear somebody, "Hey, Aaron, is that you?" So that was wonderful. So yeah.
Well, very quickly on that note, you've got your own production company. Do you want to tell folks about that a little bit and how they can get get you in to do some work?
I do video production of all types. As you know, I was doing that game, and I used to do all the video for that theater back in the day. And so I just do a wide variety of video production. So whether it's, corporate stuff, or I do some stuff for special features for movies on certain Blu-rays and such. And, obviously good old fashioned wedding or mitzvah or whatever you got going on, I can handle it. So, but yeah, Rainstorm Video and Film is my company, or just, or it's just me. It's just Aaron, Video Aaron. So
just check it out over at Instagram at Hudson Frohawk, FROHAWK. And once again, want to send shout outs to Danny Zalesko and dzpresents.com/events and vinylrecorddude.com. Check them out when you're in Scottsdale, over on Scottsdale and Shea. On behalf of Jim, Marty, Kathy, again, thank you, Aaron, and thank you, everyone, for listening to or watching us here on All Over the Place. We'll be back real soon. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me.
All Over the Place, where the fun sanity never ends.